This story will cover from then to now and next, all about change, how to turn losers into winners. A snow petrel in the Antarctic, one of a group of so-called tube noses that literally span the world's oceans from top to bottom, as we'll see. Here with some pintado petrels is the star of our story, the Fulmar petrel, the southern version. They're all at home on the waves, spending much of their time cruising the open sea that covers 3/5 of the surface of our blue planet. Much smaller than the Fulmar is the storm petrel, the size of a sparrow. And much bigger is an albatross. Depending on their size, their food varies from tiny plankton picked up from the surface to, in this case, a dead body stuck in a meltwater stream. These are heavy-duty giant petrels, which can be white too. They're all beautifully adapted to living in all sorts of sea, except these days to this. It could be a wet wipe on its way to a seabird from your bathroom. And it's certainly not coming back. Tube noses. We'll follow the link from our homes and how we live today to seabirds, the other side of the world. These black-browed albatrosses still nest in huge colonies in the Antarctic, but their days may be numbered because of our modern lifestyles and our demand for fish. One of these has regularly turned up in the past amongst the gannets in the far north of Scotland. A long way to come, and then sitting there thinking you're a gannet, and as well not being able to breed. At very much the other end of Britain is Land's End in Cornwall, the furthest southwest county, with rugged sea cliffs and bountiful seas. So it's a perfect place for our northern Fulmar, but it's not that perfect for a bird that's also sadly called the Flying Dustbin. Much of what we throw away can be disposed of properly or recycled. But a lot of it ends up in the sea, messing up the place, as at St Ives in Cornwall, or the beautiful beach at St Michael's Mount nearby. All sorts are excreted, usually innocently. Big items may get broken up in the sea, and the tiny remains end up in the stomachs of fulmars and brought back to land at Tintagel. Beautiful, protected, yes, but hiding traces of plastic that can kill. According to the Marine Conservation Society, in recent cleanups, they have counted an average of over 50 wet wipes for every mile of coast on 300 beaches. Foil, cotton tips, bottle tops, bits of balloon, cling film. You name it, we use it, the sea gets it, and a seal gets it too. Except for competing fishermen perhaps, people love seals. They're a Cornish attraction. But we all love plastic too in its multitude of uses. Light, strong, so varied, so indestructible. And that's the problem when it ends up in the sea, or even wrapped round a seal or a dolphin. They feed on fish, which themselves pick up plastic, and so it's passed on up the plastic chain. And we eat those same fish. A dead dolphin, sadly. This marine chain of death begins in a really scary way, sometimes from plastics broken up by the sea and there perhaps forever, and in something even more sinister. They're called microbeads, and microfibers. The first, microbeads, could be in your toothpaste, up to 100,000 of them in one helping or blob, then down the sink, perhaps. The second, the microfibers, might come from your washing machine, from clothes, ironically made from recycled plastics in the first place. Tiny, tiny plankton, much magnified here, filter feeding the microbeads into their bodies, and then they will continue up the chain, possibly to us. 100,000 down the sink from one use, probably with many swallowed, which then ends up in the feeding path of the mighty basking shark, whose main food is plankton, sieved out by that huge mouth filter of the world's second biggest fish. So it's a complex food web, evolved from pole to pole, but now facing a new ingredient, a new impact. And here at Rinsey in Cornwall, detectives are on the case. And by studying seabirds like the fluttering Fulmar, perhaps they can help turn losers into winners. It's a big challenge, counting the millions of seabirds, not only in Britain, but around the world, to try and find out what is going on, and why, and what can be done about it. Can this little bird, the Fulmar, give us some clues? Courting on the nest ledge with cackles. They're noting everything, as are hundreds of experts around the coast every spring and summer. This kittiwake is watching them. It's another species whose populations are being carefully monitored, which, as with the Fulmar, so unpredictably go up and down. Not canaries in the coal mine, but Fulmars at sea. Warnings from the wild, perhaps. Very difficult to count out there, so nest sites are the answer. But there's always the question of how many are absent, feeding at sea, with the partner sitting at home on the ledge. Sometimes it could be half or double. By the old tin mine chimney at Rinsey, Mark Grantham picks up the story.
So this is Rinsey Cliffs on the Cornish coast, and this little zone here has been one of my study sites for 5 years now. And basically we do a lot of monitoring here of various seabirds. So we're looking at things like kittiwake and shag and Fulmar as well. Our main study species is kittiwake, but that's kind of one of the losers here, really. That we started off with around 80 pairs in the zone here, and over the years it's gone down now to fewer than 15. Last year we had 4, the year before we had 6 pairs, all of which failed. We have actually got chicks this year, which was a bit of an improvement, but nowhere near the 80 pairs from before. So kittiwake are doing quite badly along this stretch of coast. So Fulmar is the latest, and Fulmar here, we don't think we've got any eggs at all yet, but they're notoriously difficult to monitor, really, because they just sit around doing nothing all day long. But we don't think we have any, but we'll know once they have chicks. They become a bit more, because obviously chicks are more independent, less at risk from predation, then they're a bit easier to monitor. So once we have chicks, we'll know a bit more about what's going on here.
No one wants to visit a beach covered in wet wipes and plastic, and beach clean-ups are organised all round the coast, run by volunteers. Well, it's a drop in the ocean, and some comes from out there, out of sight, out of mind. Currents and wind may take it away, but some plastic never dies. And it seems many seabirds do die because of it. It may be an ill wind that helps distribute the plastic, but it's the same wind that sails a boat or enables a Fulmar to do what it does best. And the stronger the wind, the better the performance. An onshore wind provides the lift the former uses, apparently effortlessly. But it's actually hard work, being or going where you want. Not just wing work, but footwork. No wonder fulmars can fly for miles over the trackless ocean, searching for food, as if their life depended on it, which it does. Same with fishermen at Newlyn. Where to go? Fish, weather, wind included. Fulmars have beaks, fishermen have nets made of plastic. When they are lost at sea, they carry on catching, so-called ghost nets. And there are many other ways man catches his prey. Crab pots, lobster pots. Traditional design with proven results. Whatever method is used, the take is increasing all the time. But the future for fishing must lie with sustainability. Most marine life has tremendous potential, like these swarms of baby lobsters. But they will never grow up to be big enough and worth catching if their home is poisoned. Back at Newlyn, the fishermen's efforts can be seen and bought. The salmon may have come down from the north, the River Tweed. Great fish from distant seas, returning to the river of their birth to spawn. Because of their decline in the wild, quotas apply, but that can hardly help if their food chain is broken, ultimately by man-made rubbish. Farmed salmon is cheaper, but they're fed on fish meal, which itself may be contaminated. It's difficult to know exactly what's going on out there, where the fulmars fish on, needing to bring food back to its chick. But the customer also needs to take fish back home, in this case a flatfish, once a living creature, now on its way to the kitchen. They're all in this together, the sea that is, whether you're a fulmar, a salmon and its prey, a flatfish, or a couple of big gulls fighting over a nice fillet. And of course there's cod, famous for its usual companion, chips. The good news is that due to quotas accepted by fishermen, stocks have recovered well in some places, and that's good for customers, shops, fishermen and seabirds, which may feed on small cod. Could that be a win, 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 win? Well, no. Though cod may not have had their chips, other fish are under pressure from overfishing. So many nets around the world cross long lines, 50 miles long, baited with hundreds of hooks, which seabirds will go for. But there may be a way of turning those losers into winners, as we'll see at the end of our story. So the fate of the fulmar, fishing, and our rubbish are inextricably linked. In fact, all seabirds have a tale to tell these days, and they tell it through their stomachs. At Newlyn, the old jetty is a reminder of the old days when small boats ruled the waves, sort of. Now massive trawlers can track with clever sonar and scoop up the whole shoals that they find. In many places there are no longer plenty more fish in the sea, as they used to say, but there is plenty more of other things. Not far from Newlyn, it used to look like this. Today it's like this, a plastic tray and a lot of seagulls, who seem to own the place and upset people. They've taken advantage of our lifestyles and moved into town where the pickings are good. Gull numbers are falling on the sea cliffs where the Fulmars fly, and numbers are changing as the research continues. Oh, that's the answer. No laughing matter if you're a hungry gull, missing out on another meal, perhaps. Time to move to the city, in this case Bristol, home of the Matthew, where there's plenty of rubbish if you know where to go. Plenty of plastic as it happens, but all in a good cause, an attempt to show the problem with large, almost lifestyle whales in a sea of 70,000 plastic bottles. For the green city of Bristol, it's a memorable show. Especially for children, those plastic users of the future. Our gull flies off to plastics new, but probably not back to the sea, now that we conveniently provide B&B in town. Humpback whales don't have that choice, of course, though they can also take off all some 40 tons of them before plunging deep into a changing world, increasingly altered by us and our demands on the ocean. In the past, man exploited the whales of the world, and how things have changed. Now many people love whales. Save the Whale was a massive campaign globally, and some species are making a comeback, like the right whale, so called because it was the right whale to kill, as it was slow and floated when dead. This was literally a giant bonanza for Fulmars, which dined on the rotting remains from the old commercial whaling at the end of the 19th century. Then as fishing trawlers spread far and wide, Fulmars followed, like gulls do today. That's if they haven't all moved inland to places like rubbish tips. Fulmar numbers have increased enormously as a result of man exploiting the sea. For example, in Britain, Fulmars only nested on one remote island group, St Kilda. In 1878 it started to spread, and it now breeds throughout the coast of the British Isles. By 1970 it was estimated there were 300,000 nests. This expansion has been achieved even though the Fulmar only has one chick and does not normally breed until it is 7 or 8 years old. The roller coaster ride of the Fulmar is a classic case in ornithology. It seems to be a species that has adapted, indeed much benefited from man. There are thought to be about 500,000 pairs breeding in the UK and Ireland now, though we may expect a decline from that unseen threat. Understandably, the massive plastics industry is not happy with the bad scientific news about their products created for our benefit. Microbeads are now being banned in some places, so the sea may get a reprieve. But is it too late? As here at Bempton Cliffs in Yorkshire by the North Sea. What's in this use is on us and in us. Linked to low-quality sperm, apparently harmless individually, these products may be causing big problems to whole human populations, as well as to the sea. Down a pipe, possibly eventually in some form down the throat of a Fulmar chick that's been waiting a long time for its parent who's been feeding out at sea. And that will do until the next time. Fulmars can eject a foul-smelling oil from their stomachs in defence, very memorable to those who study them. Such as Jan van Franeker from the Netherlands, a world expert on the food of Fulmars, trying to work out why they died. Down the pipe, down into the stomach, all sorts of stuff. Here are the contents from the stomach of just one unlucky Fulmar. It's tiny microscopic plastic particles that are the big worry. Nothing like the size of items found on the other side of the world on Midway Island, Hawaii, in Laysan albatrosses. Our own little albatross, the Fulmar, here in the North Sea at Bempton, is also being studied along with other species that may be warning us about what's out there. All part of a network that includes most of our coasts. Bempton Cliffs, an RSPB reserve, has easy access, but often seabirds nest on remote cliffs and islands and are difficult to reach, let alone count. Here's a lonely puffin. Their numbers tend to rise and fall, and heavy rain may flood their nesting burrows. They favour sand eels, and at one time a Danish power station was burning tons of sand eels. Now, how crazy is that? There are an estimated 600,000 pairs altogether, 20,000 of them in Ireland and nearly 500,000 pairs in Scotland. To the powerful gannet, a fishing trip across the North Sea to Norway could be well worth it, but that's if the fish can be found and haven't been fished out by man. Same applies to the kittiwake, studied too down in Cornwall, with Fulmars as well, by Mark Grantham. These counts go back to 1969 with Operation Seafarer, so they're an important comparison with the good or bad old days. Gannets continue to add to their nests even when the chicks are well grown, as here at Bempton. You hardly need a big lens, though it can be useful, sadly. Graphic as it is, the more sinister threat comes from the food these birds are eating. So in the case of the Fulmar, the problem is hidden inside until you open one up. It is excellent that the RSPB protects Bempton Cliffs and the public flock here to see the birds, especially the puffins. This is the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, the RSPB, at its best. With over 1 million members, it's a force to be reckoned with, though it's up against the plastics industry in all its very many forms. By 2050, a study has found that about 99.8% of 186 species of seabirds, including albatrosses, fulmars, gulls and penguins, will have eaten plastic. By 2050, there may be more plastic than fish in the oceans by weight. Bad news for puffins and much else. They catch sand eels, which in itself is tricky, but then holding them and still catching more is even more tricky. The tongue holds food against the upper mandible, so it can open the beak to catch more. And they're stacked together for delivery to the puffling underground. Fishing is a competitive business, not only amongst seabirds, but with human fishermen. Similarly, it's a trade-off, the cost of fuel and manpower as against energy, flying to find food and bringing it back. It's a gamble every time. These are North Atlantic puffins. Over in the North Pacific is the rather glamorous tufted puffin. They share their fishing grounds with guillemots, another kind of auk. They can fly well in the air, but especially underwater, as they search for prey. But it's not all they'll find and swallow down there. Scientists have found 89% of tufted puffin stomachs sampled contain plastics, including what they call consumer debris and industrial pellets. And it's increasing off the west coast of North America. All over the world now, seabirds are chasing fish like sand eels, full of plastics. In addition, as the sea warms due to climate change, their living food supply is changing too. Some of the prey is winning and some is losing. These days it's tough out there if you're a seabird. There's also overfishing to compete with, as certain celebrities remind us. What a combination! But will the publicity work? 2016. The world's seabird population has dropped by 70% in the last 60 years, down from more than 300 million to less than 70 million, according to the experts at the University of British Columbia. Just good friends. At current rates of global production, about 200,000 tons of plastic end up in the ocean every year, affecting all life, from plankton to whales. Enough to cover the world, including puffins, in cling film. In our competition for marine resources, wildlife can suffer. This eider duck may struggle to feed, and the future for her family is uncertain, as plastics seem to be taking over the planet. Even seaweed, an important food in some countries. Plastic bags have become a big political issue. As they turn up in the sea looking like jellyfish, it's hardly surprising that they get eaten or caught by mistake. But it's hardly a laughing matter. A fact of sea life today, when fish themselves may become outnumbered by plastics worldwide.
They'll eat those plastic bags, then their tummies blow up and they die.
In January 2015, 29 dead sperm whales stranded on shores around the North Sea, with the largest brains of any animal that has ever lived. In their 4 stomachs of some of them, scientists found 100 plastic bags plus more plastics, and no food. They'd starved to death. A dead zone. Almost. So where does this leave our Fulmar chick, waiting patiently perhaps, back in English Cornwall, looking forward to its next meal? Which passing adult is its parent? And back to where our detective story began, the Antarctic, where the southern Fulmar rules those vast cold waves, sharing them with a truly wandering albatross, which may travel over 4,000 kilometres to find food, often meeting long-line fishing vessels where they may grab a baited hook. The parent, if it survives, will return to its chick, bringing whatever it may have picked up at sea. So there it goes, whatever it is, from many kilometres from here, perhaps a plastic shopping bag, thought to be a jellyfish by the bird. For its relative, the little Fulmar, may bring back bits of all sorts, down the pipe, down the chick's pipe, possibly blocking its stomach, so it eventually starves to death. In 2015, the latest estimate suggests that globally there is a minimum of 5.25 trillion pieces of plastic weighing nearly 269,000 tons floating on the ocean surface alone. So what's down below, you wonder? The northern Fulmar has been extensively used as an indicator species, one that has had its ups and downs, alongside man. Now how can we keep these fine birds that can tell us so much? Well, there's a new way of stopping birds grabbing hooks, a kind of protective pod. There's a crowdfunding campaign, the largest clean-up in history apparently, and the recycling of plastic ocean waste to make floating villages. At least some good news about a very big problem for everyone.